Well, after last week's very quiet studio show, or I guess it was technically at Daly's place, this week AEW had to move to a undisclosed location, which actually ended up being somewhere in Georgia. I'm not really sure where it actually was. I know it's probably been reported somewhere at this point, but it pretty much looked like some sort of training facility of some kind. It looked like they had AstroTurf underneath some of the padding and whatnot, or where there was no padding, you could see like an AstroTurf bottom or anything like that. So wherever they were, it was some sort of training facility, probably either indoor soccer or just training for football or running or anything along those lines. So not really sure what they were actually in, but that's where they were, somewhere in Georgia, because Florida pretty much locked down everything, so they were not going to be able to continue filming in Florida, though now they're not going to be able to be filming in Georgia either, because that has been all closed down. So that is going to be a problem for next week. I do not know if they've even filmed anything more than what they just had this week, and that was it. So we will see how it's going to go next week, or if they're going to have to find another location. But I really think at this point, if they find a location, they just tape the next, 4-6 weeks worth of TV in a couple days and get it all in the can, send everybody home so they can be basically self-quarantined for the next 6 weeks or whatever, so we can make sure that the entire roster is safe and sound and we don't have to worry about this going forward. They're obviously going to have issues finding places to do this, but having that kind of break and isolation hopefully kind of works it out so you don't have to worry about that. This episode was a lot better than last week, because last week, which I'm sorry I missed to make an episode, I'll talk a little bit about it this week as well. Last week they had nobody in the crowd, which was just horrible because there was like no noise, but at least this time they had Billy Gunn and Austin Gunn on one side, mostly cheering for the baby faces at that, and then on the other side there was Jimmy Havoc, Kip Sabian, Penelope Ford, Britt Baker. They were all on the other side and obviously supporting the heels throughout the entire night, but making plenty of noise and yelling a lot. So that was good to see. Added plenty of atmosphere just having those 6-ish people out there. Way better than last week. Last week it just sounded really flat because you didn't have any other feedback other than what was happening in the ring and the commentary. And last week the commentary was super high in the audio mix. It almost drowned out anything that was going on in the ring as well. But this episode was actually really good. I thought that there weren't really any spots that dragged. They worked their commercials in between everything. I think there was only one match maybe two matches that might have went through a commercial break, but you probably didn't lose anything seeing the commercial break. And since they had no crowd, they didn't need to keep them engaged and really just had regular commercial breaks where they didn't have to do anything. I was watching on the Fight feed, which in that case, they just threw up the AEW logo on the screen with some music, and that was it for the 2.5, 3.5 minutes, whatever the commercial length was. So they didn't have to. Usually a lot of times they try to keep it so the audience doesn't get tired or get bored, I guess I should say, and they have their matches go through commercial break. When I saw them in Boston, I could barely tell when they happened to be in commercial break because of how they had everything structured. And it was really nice. They could actually have decent commercial breaks. So they also announced at the top the brackets for the TNT title tournament, which is going to be their secondary title. I will get into the brackets near the end of this show, and we'll talk about it a bit. First up, we have Kenny Omega versus Trent. This was an excellent back and forth match. It was really high paced. They did a lot of stuff in this match. There was really no downtime, and they had Chucky T and Orange Cassidy was out there with Trent as well. So you had the threesome of the best friends. After a moonsault from Trent to the floor off the apron to Kenny, he gets the hug with the best friends, and then Omega hits a dive after that and is like asking Chucky T and Orange Cassidy to give him a hug. He's waving them in with his hands, and at one point Orange Cassidy starts to walk towards him with his arms open, and Chucky T just grabs him by the back of the collar and pulls him away. It was a really funny little moment right there. They actually end up fighting on the outside a bit. Omega gives Trent a belly-to-back suplex on the floor, and there's a post kind of that's holding up it's a structural post that's holding the building's roof up or whatever, and it does have a little bit of padding on the outside, but Kenny ends up giving Trent like a buckle bomb into the post, and then it really turns into a bit of a brawl at this point. I forgot to mention that actually right at the beginning of the match they did shake hands, so it was like a little bit of a friendly acknowledgement right there. Like I said, Billy and Austin Gunn were making a ton of noise throughout the entire night and added plenty of atmosphere. Good fast pace, lots of back and forth. There's a really scary top rope throw to Kenny from Trent. It looked like Trent's right foot slipped. I think they were going for an exploder suplex off the top rope. Kenny landed really awkwardly, right high up on the shoulders, really on like one of his bad shoulders that I believe he actually still has a bit of a tear in the labrum. So that was a bit scary. Hopefully he's okay after that. Eventually, Kenny ends up hitting the one-winged angel for the win right when the 1 minute call is made. And this was cool because they started announcing the minutes at 3 and then 2, and then right as he was right as he was dropping Trent, that is when the 1 minute call came. So, it's kind of cool to see it that they call out 3 and 2, and you're like, oh, this might actually just go to a time limit draw. They're already 19 minutes in or whatever. And that is not what happened, and they didn't go up against the time limit. So they didn't even go all the way. It's not one of those ones where, the guy pins him with 2 seconds left in the match or anything like that. He got the win with 1 full minute remaining still. And I believe if you actually timed the match out, they kind of messed up somewhere, and it actually went over the 20 minutes if you actually time it bell to bell. So there's that. But, they got it done. There was 1 minute remaining when the pin was made. So after the match, they shake hands, even though during the match it got a little heated and a little aggressive against one another. But they shook hands. Then there was a Matt Hardy and Jericho recap about what happened last week, just their segment in the ring, and Matt Hardy saying that he is coming to save AEW, and AEW needs to be saved at all costs and whatnot. Next, they had a little video package for Hikaru Shida. It was pretty much just a highlight reel. I would really like to see them build character a bit more. She has a very high level engagement on her social medias, and it does not contradict her character. So I think bringing some of either the stuff that she does on her social media into the show, or get some sort of video like that filmed by the producer of the show and bring that in. I would just like to see a lot more actual character development of Hikaru Shida. I don't even think we've heard her speak. I don't know if she's had a promo, whether in English or Japanese, and her English is not bad. It's better than Asuka's, I believe. So there shouldn't be an issue. And if she wants to do it in Japanese and they subtitle it, that's perfectly fine. I don't see a problem with that. It worked fine for Riho back in the beginning, where they actually did have her have one sit-down promo where she was talking to the camera in Japanese, and they just subtitled it. Perfectly fine, but then they just kind of stopped doing that. So I don't know why they don't continue that. It'd make way more sense if they did that. And, if people are not comfortable doing promos in English, that is not a problem. Just subtitle it. I mean, we have that all the time with other combat sports in boxing and MMA, that they have a translator for the fighter because they don't speak English. So they go through a translator, which there's no reason they couldn't do that in AEW as well if they need to. I mean, I don't see a problem with that being the case. Next up, so after that package, because Hikaru Shida was in the package, it was Hikaru Shida versus Anna Jayy. Anna Jayy is actually a student of QT Marshall. So I thought this match was actually going to be a squash match, and it actually ended up, Anna Jayy got a lot more in than I thought she was going to, so it was a bit of a back and forth for a little while. She actually got in a decent amount of stuff, a lot of striking and power moves throughout this match, and I mean, she was much taller than Hikaru Shida, but Hikaru Shida is super strong because we've seen her give Nyla Rose a Falcon Arrow before, so she's super strong. So the size difference didn't really come into play, but I think she was at least 6 inches taller than Hikaru Shida. But in all, it was a good match. There was a funny little part. Orange Cassidy was out in the crowd holding a sign. The sign was blank. It was just a piece of blank poster board, which I thought was hilarious. So he'll hold up a sign, but he's so lazy or so chill, he doesn't even bother putting anything on it. Hikaru Shida ends up winning in the end with a Falcon Arrow. I thought this was a solid match, so way to go. Next up, there was a very, very long but very good video package hyping up Hager versus Moxley. So they show Moxley hitting the paradigm shift on Hager last week, and then actually on Dark, which I didn't actually end up watching, Hager choked out Moxley. So they actually did mention something that did happen on Dark and played into the story. So they should probably start saying, hey, we have the show Dark. It's on YouTube. Go watch it, because they just forwarded the storyline of the AEW champion on AEW Dark. So they should really be promoting AEW Dark, because they are progressing not just mid-card storylines. This is the AEW championship storyline, so there's no reason they should not be promoting AEW Dark way more often than they are. It's just ridiculous. I mean, I'm glad they mentioned it this week, but they need to get in the habit of, before the show goes off the air, just say, hey, these are the matches that are going to be on AEW Dark next Tuesday. They already know what the matches are. It's not like they are going to be filming AEW Dark in 6 days. They're filming it the same night as they're doing Dynamite. So just tell us what matches you are filming that night, and you're all set. So in this promo, Hager's talking that Moxley is a fool if he thinks he can compete with him. Doesn't care if he is the AEW champion right now. That doesn't scare him. Moxley is being interviewed at Daly's place it looks like during the day up in the stands. So this was probably filmed last week at some point. Moxley says he's on top of the world right now, but he's a miserable, pissed off bastard. He's a miserable son of a bitch because there are people in AEW and all over the world that want his title. Says that AEW is the hottest promotion, and that puts a target on his back. And then he says that there are people out there like Jake Hager who think they can beat him, and that's not going to happen. They have a little bit of Jericho saying that the Inner Circle, they do things for themselves. That is stupid for Moxley to say he's doing it for the fans of wrestling or whatever. They do stuff for themselves. Moxley says that he'll defend the title with his life. Hager again goes back. He's saying that He doesn't care about making the fans happy. He's not doing it for the fans. He's there to take Moxley out. Jake says he knows that Moxley is below him and that he can choke him out. And he doesn't have the ruthless aggression, which is a very interesting line to use. And calling back to his time in WWE, I'm assuming that phrasing was not on accident. And then Jericho is all about Hager becoming the champion because the championship, the inner circle is not the elite. And it'll be great because that'll make two champions who are in the inner circle. And Moxley says at the end of the day, he may be a 200-pound, 6'4", he may be a living, breathing semi-truck, but in the end, he's just a man, just another Goliath that David will have to find a way to slay this big bastard. And so in 2 weeks, we're going to be having Jake Hager versus Jon Moxley in an empty arena, no-holds-barred match for the title. So that should be a very interesting thing to come out. And of course, they did say in 2 weeks. So I have not heard yet, did they tape the next couple weeks of television while they're there at this facility? I am unclear on how the timing all worked out with that. So I got a question in the chat. When have they ever promoted Dark? They have a few times, but it's very rare. I had a running count at one point. They only advertised it twice in 13 weeks and only mentioned it those 2 times plus like 2 other times. So it was only mentioned 4 out of the first 13 weeks of the show being on the air. They just do a really bad job about promoting their other show that they've advanced storylines on. So, we will see. Next up, we have Lance Archer making his AEW in-ring debut, and I laughed when out comes Marko Stunt. He is going to be Lance Archer's first match. I thought this was going to be hilarious because he was just going to get tossed around, and that is basically what happened. But first, there was a really good Jake Roberts promo for Archer. He's saying how Archer is there to destroy whatever plan they've cooked up. Ends up being Marko Stunt is the plan that they cooked up. Says just because he's smiling doesn't mean he's happy, and that Cody is just delaying the inevitable. He's playing games, and children play games, and we don't gamble. Gambling is for fools. And he says that Cody might be smarter than he thought he was. He might be smart enough to be afraid, or maybe his better half is telling him not to go. I'm pretty sure that she wears the pants. So that was a excellent promo from Jake. He was not in the arena, which is probably good given his health, everything. So you do not want to, he's very high risk. So they also kept off, there was no Arn Anderson, there was no Tully, there was no JR. So they kept off everybody who's in that high risk group and stuck to the core people. And basically the match ended up being a squash, but Marko did get a little bit of offense in here and there, just due to his speed that he usually does. Archer ends up hitting the blackout for the pin, and that was that. He gets out of the ring, and Marko's still laying in the ring, and he starts walking to the back, but decides, I'm going to go back into the ring. He goes in the ring, brings Marko to the ring apron, and then actually tosses Marko off of the apron over the barricade into Billy and Austin Gunn and Orange Cassidy. And you can hear the heels from the other side laughing about it. But man, he picked him up and just threw him like 6 feet over that railing. So that is Lance Archer's a big, strong dude. And just like looking at the size difference when Marko squared up to Lance right at the beginning of the match, Lance looked like he's 10 feet tall because Marko's Marko. and is just a massive size difference. So that was fun to watch. Next up, we have a Brodie Lee segment. He is kind of in a boardroom. He's got a TV behind him. It just has white noise on the TV. And he says that his name is Mr. Brodie Lee. He knows how people are feeling in this uncertain time, that he was once lost and downtrodden and beaten down. And he has one of the guys in a mask stand up, and he says, the guy who stands up says, "Thank you, Mr. Lee." And then Brodie Lee says that that's Mr. Brodie. And then the guy replies, "Yes, sir, Exalted One." And then he says, "It's Mr. effing Brodie." And then grabs a, then he says, say what I told you to say. And he kind of meekishly says, and holding up his hand, "We are one." And Brodie grabs a glass and throws it against the wall, smashing it. And with great emphasis, he says, "It is we are one. Please sit down." And then they show another guy that's sitting on the other side of the table, yawning. Brodie sits down next to him and says, "Anything going on at home you want to tell me about?" He says, "No, sir." "Is there a reason you're tired? Is there a reason you're exhausted? Nothing in the world is open. There is no reason for you to yawn in my presence. Do you understand what tiredness shows people? It shows weakness. Are you weak? Right now you look weak to me. I can't have that within my doors, or within these doors. Do you understand? Don't ever yawn in my presence again. Go." And he just kicks him out. And that is the end of the segment. So this is getting very interesting with the Dark Order. I don't know why anybody would want to join the Dark Order at this point, especially with the dude in charge being a bit of a douchebag. So he's not instilling much confidence in his followers at this point. So we will see how this works out. I am liking the character because it is a clear rip on Vince McMahon and really jabbing at Vince McMahon's idiosyncrasies. The sneezing, we all know he hates sneezing because it's something he does not have control over. Yawning is the same way. He just hates both of those things. So I love how they're just really jabbing and twisting the knife a little bit. He's never going to see it. He's probably never going to know that this even happened. But I still think it is hilarious that Brodie Lee's character is using Vince McMahon's real life idiosyncrasies to kind of bolster it, or make him even more of a heelish type of character. So that goes into, next up we have QT Marshall and Dustin Rhodes, who are the Natural Nightmares, accompanied by Brandy, and versus Dark Order number 8 and number 9. So this was pretty much a squash match. Not a whole lot to get into. QT Marshall looked good. Dustin Rhodes it has looked good ever since he came over to WWE. So excellent here. The biggest thing happened after the match. QT Marshall throws the mask that was given to him last week onto the guy who ended up getting pinned. Then Brodie Lee makes his way out, and he stares down QT Marshall for a second, and then goes into the ring, gives a massive power bomb to the guy who took the pin, and then just stares daggers at the other guy who is out there. Then he just turns and walks off. This power bomb was brutal. It was extremely high up on the shoulders, like he did not drop down. This guy was super short too, so given how tall Brodie Lee is, like he didn't do like a sit out power bomb or anything like that. I think he just dropped, and I don't think he ever went down to a knee or anything. So he just gave this massive powerbomb. Given how short this guy was, he had a longer way than usual than he was probably used to on how far the mat was going to be, and he kind of over-rotated. Instead of flat backing it, he took it high up on the shoulders and back of the neck. And Brodie Lee gave a lot of force behind it. So it was a brutal powerbomb that he gave him. Next up is the Jericho Gold that has made AEW every week. Jericho's on it. This segment had me laughing like crazy when it was over. I thought this was probably the best segment Jericho has done so far in AEW. It was brilliant. So Jericho is at his home in the hot tub, drinking a little bit of the bubbly, and he's pouring himself a glass, and instead of drinking out of the glass that he just poured, he starts drinking out of the bottle, which is a callback to he did the same thing when he first had the belt stolen. After that, when he did the YouTube promo in the hot tub, he did the same thing. He poured the champagne into a glass, but then took a sip right out of the bottle. So it was a callback to that. He says that today's a holiday, and just like how Martin Luther King Day is to celebrate the king, and how Memorial Day is to celebrate all the soldiers around the country, and he says today's April Fool's Day, and he's never seen bigger fools than the Elite. He says that Cody was stupid for hiring Matt Hardy or Damascus. He says he's 3,000 years old, and that's good because it's going to take another 3,000 years to get over the embarrassment of the ass kicking that the Inner Circle is going to give them. Vanguard is flying in from over the lake, and eventually it comes up. Jericho gets out of the hot tub, and we see for the first time he is wearing his black leather pants with a belt in the hot tub, which is just a hilarious sight to see. And he's trying to get Vanguard to join the Inner Circle. He says that he said a lot of mean things to him last week, and that he's you know what I'm trying to say. And so, like, again, Jericho can't say the word sorry. He's like, I just don't want it to. So he says, I'm sorry, and you know, I want us to be clear. And then he says, I want you to join the Inner Circle. So it's funny that he can't say the word sorry, and he's saying he wants to be clear about what he's saying. He says he wants him to join the Inner Circle, and he has this little kid T-shirt on a metal hanger. So he's like, I want you to wear this shirt. And he ends up clipping the hanger onto Vanguard 1. He's like, so will you join us? Will you join us? And he starts, and he flies away, and Jericho's chasing him across the backyard. He says, come back here. And then they show Jericho. He just yells, release the hounds. And then his dogs come out of the house, and like it's two like lab sized dogs, and then there's like a pug and like a chihuahua and a little poofy dog just kind of tailing behind. And like the chihuahua doesn't even bother leaving the porch. He's just standing there at the step, just like looking like, what are you guys doing? The dogs are barking at Vanguard. He's flying off, and Jericho is running after him, and he gets over to the dock on the lake. He says, I'm gonna get you, Vanguard. And then he has like this completely overacted, dramatic, like bad Bond villain, I'm gonna get you. And then he says, like, quietly, little bastard stole my shirt. I was laughing my ass off at the end of this segment. I thought it was so funny. The clip of, I believe, the entire promo video is on YouTube. So if you missed the show, at least go watch that clip, because it was the highlight of the show. It was so good. It was completely genius. And after the wackiness of last week, so last week's promo between Jericho and Matt Hardy was weird, wacky. I'm not sure where to go with it. Campy. So last week, Matt Hardy is shown up in the balcony, and then they do these horrible camera cuts, and Matt Hardy like moves, and then he moves again and moves again, so it looks like he's teleporting, but you can see Chris Jericho's hair change from camera cut to camera cut, and I'm hoping they did that on purpose to make it look campy on purpose, and that's how I took it. So they were completely giving a wink wink on that this is campy, because they doing that in post is super simple. All you had to do is throw up a green screen in front of Chris Jericho, and then you could just have one static shot of Chris Jericho, and his hair can blow around and it wouldn't change completely from camera shot to camera shot. So making that look like Matt Hardy was actually teleporting would not be hard. So the way they did it, I am like 100% sure that they're doing that type of camera trick on purpose, because it was so B-movie 1970s camera trickery, like so blatantly camera trick. Everybody's seen that particular type of camera work before and know it's only in crappy B movies at this point in history. You would never see it in a high budget movie these days, because it's just such a ridiculous way to do it, and there are much easier and better ways to get the shot looking good unlike this. But the promo between the two was very interesting. You know, we have straight up the old broken Matt gimmick, that his pronunciation is way over the top. He has this weird accent. He uses these phrases like "you are obsolete" and "delete" and "wonderful," but just how the emphasis that he uses on all these words, and the body movement and the streak in the hair and all that stuff is very, very much broken Matt. And that did run its course back when it first happened back in 2017. And I hope that they're going to not be doing a rehash of broken Matt, and we actually get some sort of explanation for why Matt is this way. Has he suffered some sort of mental break? So it's not just everybody placating his idiosyncrasies in this particular character that he is playing here. So are they going to go down the road eventually of exploring why Matt has gone crazy? Because obviously he is acting very crazy. So something happened. And I don't think that catalyst was ever explained in the original Broken storyline. And I think it needs to reside within our reality instead of the fictional reality or the alternate reality that the Broken universe originally was. I think there is plenty to do within the character that he has. He can be crazy, and he can think that he is Damascus and is 3,000 years old. That is perfectly fine if Matt Hardy thinks that. But is everybody else going along with it on purpose to placate Matt in some way to see where it's going? Like, does Chris Jericho really believe Matt Hardy is this character or is Damascus or whatever? I don't believe so. How it was presented last week, how he was talking to Matt Hardy last week, I do not believe Chris Jericho believes Matt Hardy is who he says he is. He believes he is Matt Hardy, and there's definitely something wrong with him. But I think Chris Jericho is playing into Matt's delusions on purpose to get some sort of leverage, or right now, because Jericho is unsure of Matt Hardy's mental state, is that he's going along with it to find out what is wrong with Matt so he can use that to his advantage, or he is just kind of going along with it to gather more information about what's going on with Matt, or what happened to Matt. So I don't think he truly believes anything that Matt's saying. He actually does believe that Matt is crazy, and they're working through it right now, but he's not letting Matt on, as he's not blatantly leading Matt on to thinking that he's crazy. He's kind of playing along with it for now. And I hope in the end that is what we find out, that everybody is playing along with Matt because they need to figure out what is wrong with Matt. That would probably be a much better storyline and stay within that. I want, somebody wrote, Likens writes, I want Jericho, I'm assuming that is to acknowledge it's just Matt to his Goonies. Yeah, so maybe when he's talking to the inner circle, we have some sort of segment where he's like, look, we know Matt is crazy. It's just Matt. He has nuts, and this is who he believes he is. We obviously don't believe this, blah, 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 but I'm doing this. So we may find out in some point. I doubt it's going to be soon, but at some point they're gonna pull the curtain back where Jericho gives his true motivations for playing along with Matt by trying to recruit Vanguard 1, which he knows is not a sentient drone who's flying around. He knows it's just a regular camera drone like every other camera drone. And he's trying to get to Matt Hardy through Vanguard 1 or playing along with it. As mentioned in the chat right here, he could threaten to go to the Hardy compound. You know, we have plenty of ways we can go with this. I just hope in the end that everybody besides Matt Hardy acknowledges at some point that we know Matt Hardy is nuts. We are entertaining his looniness because XYZ. Whether it's we're worried about the guy, but we need to figure out what's wrong with him, or we know he's nuts and let's just gather as much dirt as possible so we can use it against him, or anything like that. I hope they stay grounded in reality instead of how I believe TNA basically made this alternate universe type of thing. So that is my concern, that they go that way, that the old storyline continues. I'd much rather this be based in reality. You can still have all the wacky stuff, just it needs to be based in reality in the end, how they tie up this story or progress the story at some point that people know that he's nuts, and maybe then we can explore what caused Matt Hardy to become the way he is. That would be so much easier. Or not easier, but it'd be so much better. And I hope they go that way. So far, I am cautiously optimistic. The words that Jericho used last week gives me a bit of hope that that is, in the end, where they're going to be going. So, and yes, as mentioned, going to the Hardy compound is another way to get or to deal with this having to do all these empty arena shows. You do it at the compound, you've done it, you're doing it at a new location, and it makes sense that there are no fans there, which is perfectly fine and perfectly acceptable. Next up, they talk about the TNT title tournament. So this is going to be their secondary title. I am perfectly fine with the name, and it makes sense because even if they weren't on TNT, they could still call it the TNT title because what's another name for Dynamite? TNT. So it works on two levels. So they are all set. They don't need to get rid of it if they happen to change networks in the future. But right now they are probably they're in till at least 2020, the end of 2023, I believe. So there's that. So we have basically a 8-man bracket. We got one side is Cody versus Shawn Spears, and then Sammy Guevara versus Darby Allin. Winners of those two matches will face each other and then go into the finals. The other side is Dustin Rhodes versus Kip Sabian, and then the other match is Colt Cabana versus Lance Archer. I am completely torn, and I do not have a good call on how this is going to go and who's going to be the first champion. So we have Cody Rhodes versus Shawn Spears as the first one. I believe Cody's probably going to take that. And I also believe that Darby Allin is going to win the match against Sammy Guevara. So we're going to have Cody versus Darby. Which one of those goes into the final? I would hope Darby, so we can elevate Darby. But I would be okay with Cody as well. And then on the other side, we have Dustin Rhodes versus Kip Sabian, and then Colt Cabana versus Lance Archer. Now, what really throws this wrench into my thinking is Colt Cabana and Kip Sabian have had a little bad blood rate lately. So if I didn't know the other two people that they were facing, I would say Colt was going to win his match and Kip Sabian was going to win his match because it would make sense for the two dudes who are kind of feuding to clash in the next round. But I don't think that is going to happen on either side because Colt Cabana is not going to beat Lance Archer and Kip Sabian is probably not going to beat Dustin Rhodes. So I think the way it's going to go down is Lance Archer and Dustin Rhodes are going to win their matches. Then Lance Archer beats Dustin Rhodes. So it's going to be either Lance Archer and Darby Allin or Lance Archer versus Cody Rhodes. And either way, I think Lance Archer is going to be the first champion. So we'll see how that works out. But that is the best I could come up with on how this is going to go. I could be completely wrong, and we could have the other way around that I said that Colt Cabana is going to win and Kip Sabian is going to beat Dustin Rhodes, and those two are going to meet, but I don't think that's going to happen. So we will see. I think Lance Archer is going to the finals, but the other side of the ledger, I'm guessing Cody and Darby Allin are going in the semis, and then either one of those could potentially go on to the finals. But I am at a loss. This is a great book because I have no idea. So, I mean, this is probably the way to book it because I don't think anybody has a good feel of how this is going to go because you could see Lance Archer, Dustin Rhodes, Cody Rhodes, and Darby Allin all being viable choices for being the first champion. So that is what we have. And putting four guys that could conceivably be the first champion, that's just good because you have no idea what's going to happen. So we will see how that goes. Next up, we have Matt Jackson visiting Nick to see how he's doing. He says, well, we can't bring you to a ring because we can't go anywhere, so we brought a ring to you. They have a ring set up on the tennis court. Matt talks about how he was scared about Nick and being taken away in an ambulance. And Nick says that he doesn't even remember what happened. He doesn't even remember being in an ambulance, and he's kind of worried about that. Nick and Matt are running some spots. Nick says he's working hard but doesn't know on a return date. Matt says the situation really put things in perspective. With a snap of a finger, he could have been a singles wrestler, and says that he appreciates his family and his happiness and his health. And Nick says that you can't take things for granted and you only have one life, so live life to the fullest. And then as they're finished up, they're walking away. Matt asks Nick how it felt. Nick says pretty good. Matt then asks if he's ready to come back. And Nick says, not yet. Next up we have, which is basically a preview of the TNT title tournament. We have basically the opponents of each other going up in a tag match. We have Shawn Spears and Sammy Guevara facing who are going to be their opponents in the first bracket, Darby Allin and Cody Rhodes. We have Sammy is vlogging during the match. He comes out to the ring with his phone sticking out of the front of his trunks. He walks over to Brandi at one point and asks for a kiss, like on the cheek, and he hands Brandi his phone to take a selfie with her, because like she's gonna take the selfie, and she runs off with his phone, and then flying out of the picture comes Darby Allin, and they crash into the barricades. At one point, Cody accidentally causes a ref distraction when Sammy Guevara looked like he was going to come into the ring and interfere, so Cody got in the ring, and that is when the ref got distracted. Darby Allin rolled up Shawn Spears, and then Sammy breaks that up behind the ref's back with this vicious running knee. Then Sammy bets Shawn Spears $50 that he can hold Darby Allin up for 10 seconds, or that he can't. And then so Spears holds Darby Allin up in a vertical suplex for 10 seconds. Then they bet that Sammy could do it for 15, which he does. And then Sammy then bets Spears to see if Spears can do it for 20 seconds. And he gets it. He goes in to get him up for the suplex, but Darby rolls it into goes for a roll up to get out of the suplex. Cody gets this hot tag. He takes out Spears on the corner. He gets a 2 count on Sammy, hits a Cody cutter for another 2 count. And it is just an Os cutter. It's the same exact move. Cody puts on a sharpshooter, and Spears runs in to interfere. So he lets go of the sharpshooter and puts a figure 4 on Spears. Sammy breaks that up with a running or a standing or whatever you want to call it, running shooting star press. Cody hits the crossroads on Sammy, but then Spears pulls Cody out of the ring. And as Sammy distracts the ref, Cody is thrown over the barrier into the heel side, and they all beat down on him. Britt Baker has taken her high heel shoe off and is hitting Cody with it. Havoc has a wrench and hits Cody with the wrench, and they're just kicking him and everything, and then they chuck him back over the barricade and throw him back in the ring. Later on, Darby hits a dive on Sammy and then runs into the ring to go hit a dive out of the other side onto Spears, but Spears ends up catching him and then drapes him over the railing. Sammy does a missile drop kick off the apron to the draped Darby Allin on the barricade. Shawn Spears gives Cody a Death Valley driver in the ring, but neither of them are legal. They end up fighting to the outside, and out of the sky comes Darby Allin. He has climbed up the pole that is holding up the ceiling of the venue, and he does a coffin drop off of the post that he had shimmied up onto Sammy and Spears and knocked them down. Darby gets thrown off the top rope at one point to the floor. Sammy hits a top rope suplex on Cody, and then Spears hits a frog splash. And then Spears brings a chair into the ring. At this point, it is Spears and Allin who are the legal men. Spears looks like he's going to hit Cody with the chair, but Allin grabs it away from him. And then Sammy on the outside actually grabs the chair from underneath the bottom rope away from Allin, which then causes Allin to turn around and look at Sammy. And when that happens, Shawn Spears rolls up Darby Allin for the pin. And Darby is pissed off. and he's talking to Cody, and then he just decks Cody with a forearm, and then he just walks off and leaves, going up the ramp all pissed, or going down the tunnel all pissed off, and that was the end of the show. So what are we doing here with Darby? Are we going to be turning Darby Allin heel? I don't think so. I think this is just going to be some temporary heat between him and Cody, so when they face each other, which is probably the inevitability on their side of the bracket, that there's a little bit of heat between them, and I'm assuming after that match they'll probably bury the hatchet and make up. But right here he is obviously overblowing what's going on because he was distracted on saving Cody from getting a chair shot, and that then led to the pin. So I think in the end, they're probably just going to bury the hatchet after their semifinals match, assuming they both win their first matches in the bracket. That would make the most sense to me, because I don't think turning Darby heel is going to work. So I don't think that's what they're doing. I think he had just lost his temper at the end of this match, and that's probably how they're going to play it off in the end. So, all in all, I thought this was an excellent episode. Much better than last week. Last week did feel like it was dragging a bit, especially with not having the wrestlers on the outside of the ring. So hopefully they recorded a few more episodes of Dynamite, because Georgia has locked down all their stuff, so they cannot film in Georgia now. So they're either going to have to find another place, or hopefully they at least recorded a bit more. So we will see how that goes if they're in the same place next week. I have not read any of that information today. I have read very little news today, so I don't have a ton to read. I didn't even look at what the ratings were today. So we'll see how that went. But you go ahead and go hunt that stuff down if you're interested in that stuff. Unfortunately, I did not. So that is all I have for you this week. Be sure to comment questions, feedback down below, or you can send an email, eric@thatswrestling.com. I am looking for a co-host of this show. If you'd like to be a AEW co-host, a New Japan co-host, or both, or you just want to fill in if I don't have somebody that week or anything like that, shoot me an email, eric@thatswrestling.com. If you're listening to this as a podcast, head over to the YouTube channel. The link is in the show notes, but you can also head over to YouTube and search for That's Wrestling, and you will find the channel. I do these shows live on YouTube, so you can join in the chat if you have any comments or questions while the review is going on. I tend to do the AEW Dynamite review at 8 o'clock on Thursday, the following night. So that is the usual, but be sure to hit the bell notification, so as soon as I schedule when the live stream is going to be, you will be notified. I tend to do it about an hour ahead of time, so you are alerted that I will be going live in about an hour or so. Or if I schedule it for, say, Friday evening, you will be alerted at that time, and then you will know to tune in on Friday instead. So if you are watching this on YouTube, you like to get this as a podcast, you can also do that. Search on all your favorite podcast apps. If you cannot find it in your podcast app of choice, send me an email so I can get it submitted to that particular app, eric@thatswrestling.com. So thanks for listening and watching, everybody, and we will see you again next week. So thanks for watching. That's Wrestling. See you later, guys.